Hello people and welcome to Is a Recording, a podcast for passions. I'm your host Kyle Duffy. If you're new here, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you do, you can check out the rest of my catalogue available up on Spotify, Anchor FM and Google Podcasts. If you like what you hear, make sure to follow along for notifications of new episodes each week. If you're a returning listener, welcome back, and I'm sorry for the hiatus. I am going to be back doing weekly uploads from here on in. I was taking a break from the podcast because I was on an internship as a part of Learning Wave SkillNet, their college course there, and I was working with Midwest Radio, which I'm going to get into in this podcast episode. There's so much I want to catch you up on over the past 5 months, so let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. It's been a while, guys, and I'm sorry for that, but I was away on an immense experience advancing in my professional development as a broadcast journalist on Midwest Radio, and I learned so much. In this episode, I'll be catching you up on everything I learned in the past 5 months and how it's helped me grow as a broadcast journalist. And I also wanted to offer my insight into why you should probably look into this course if you're looking to build connections, if you're looking to advance in the area of radio and get one step closer to getting a permanent job in a radio station that maybe you've had your eye on for a while. I personally loved my time on the internship with Midwest. I learned so much from some great professionals, great people. The atmosphere in there really helped me grow as a broadcast journalist because really there wasn't anything at stake. There really wasn't anything at stake, and I felt like I could sit back and observe, and I wasn't being pressured to go out and do things when I wasn't ready, but I also felt like I was able to take the reins myself and go out and do segments, go out and do vox pops, and I was able to learn and grow at my own pace. I wasn't tossed in the deep end too early. I was made to grow and learn in a healthy environment, and really that's my time summed up in Midwest. I learned and grew in a healthy environment with some great people. Even the mess ups, we're all going to mess up in our job sometimes, and even the mess ups didn't feel like monumental mistakes to me in there. One thing I do is I always get inside my own head when I mess up in a job or on a college course or whatever. In this instance, I messed up a live readout and I stumbled over my words. I was like a deer in the headlights and I lost myself for a couple of seconds. I gathered myself back up again, but it was a clear and concise mistake. And I got off air and I was thinking, oh God, okay. And I kind of introverted into myself and people weren't really talking. No one was making a big deal out of it. But in my mind, because no one said anything to me straight away, I was thinking, okay, well then everyone's very aware of it. And they're kind of like treating me with kid gloves or walking on eggshells around me because I messed up for the first time. So I messed up the readout at maybe 11 o'clock and it was before lunch. So I spent the rest of my time before lunch just kind of getting back to work and trying to forget about it, giving myself my own pep talk in my head because it was my first big mistake. And I tend to take these things a bit hard, even though in hindsight, in the long run, it's not a big deal at all. And I've actually gotten a lot better at having those talks with myself in my head and not letting my anxieties run away with me. But on that day, for some reason, I couldn't talk myself out of it. I was still kind of obsessing around it. And it wasn't until another presenter there, Jerry Glennon, who was such a nice man and was so sound to me on the internship, really nice guy and really great professional and just awe-inspiring what he does, what he's able to do. It wasn't until that he said to me, listen, I've been in this job a long time. I mess up from time to time. We all do. Just get over it. It's done now. What are you working on at the moment? And I just kind of showed him, okay, this is what I'm doing for lunch. Okay, go in and practice that. Go in and make sure the next one is better than this one. And it was in that moment that I just decided to get over my fear and stop worrying about messing up on air because it's part and parcel of the job. It comes with the territory. It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen. And really, all you can do is adapt in the moment. That's what makes you a better broadcaster, a better journalist, a better presenter. And it took someone saying that to me. I knew it in my head. I knew it in theory. but it always takes someone else saying it to me for me to really sink in and actually have it sink into my mind. So from then on out, I just decided, okay, I'm going to mess up from time to time. It doesn't matter. What really matters at the end of the day is that you have a passion for what you're presenting, that you have this presentation planned out, and that you know going into it that you're well prepared, because that will read a lot more than messing up on your words. Everyone messes up on their words from time to time. Even the most experienced broadcaster, even the most veteran presenter will have a fumble on air. It's about how you recover from it and whether you let yourself freeze in the moment. I kind of learned in that moment, okay, I'm not going to freeze again. And I didn't. And from then on, I made sure to go into every segment, every project that I did with the station with a sense of confidence. And even if I didn't know what I was doing, and if it was the first time I was doing it, I made sure to think, okay, and I'd rationalize it and say, okay, let's just break down each bit of what I'm doing and make sure that it's not as scary as I think it is. So for instance, the first time I interviewed someone in person, the first time I went out and did vox pops on the street, the first time I actually put together a cohesive segment that was just me talking and that it was almost a short documentary. You know, I made sure to break down each individual task and made sure that I minimized it enough so that in my head I wasn't terrified of messing up. And that's one thing I would definitely recommend as well. Just take each bit as it comes to you and try not to think of ways you're going to mess up. You might mess up down the line, but it's about how you handle it in the end. Really, overall, I've learned so much and grew so much with the 5 months in Midwest. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone that I worked with. And hopefully I'll see you again soon for work down the line. I offered my services for locum work and relief work and fill-in work down the line. There's no permanent positions in the radio station at the moment, which I understood going into it. But again, I wasn't looking for that straight away. I didn't want to go in with this mindset of, oh, I better get a job at the end of this, because if I didn't, I would have been disappointed and possibly had some misplaced, unjustified anger. But overall, I think that it's about the experience. It's about having those references on your list and those experiences on your list. You know, I can now say that I put together a 20-minute segment for on air. I was able to interview people around all different kind of topics. I got to represent Midwest Radio at movie premieres. I got to talk about things I'm passionate about on radio. I got to put together segments for presenters, and I got to add those things to my CV, and it's going to help me in the long run. Really, this internship, I would recommend it to anyone who's looking to get into the world of radio, who doesn't know exactly where to go from here. You might have been doing volunteer work up until now. You want to get your foot in the door and get your first paid experience in a radio station. And I think this is the perfect avenue for you, because you're learning from people in Learning Waves who want to help you grow as much as they can. They offer modules along with the internship. So every other week I'd have a Zoom session online where we were learning from someone about voiceovers, about CVs, about demos, about maybe, you know, the broadcasting network and stuff like that. This course has helped me build up connections in the world of radio. It's helped me put my name out there as a professional, helped me grow as a professional, and I intend to use my skills that I've learned on this internship to help me grow on the podcast and on CRC FM as well. I'm back in CRC FM doing 2 shows a week on the Aidan Crowley Grapevine show, the current affairs show there. So I'm looking forward to getting back on live radio, because there's nothing like it. Really, I was pre-recording the segments with Aidan and I enjoyed it, but there's an element to live radio. You feel more in the moment. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back on the live segments, talking about things I'm passionate about and all the excitement that comes along with it. You know, when I look back on the past few months, it has been really memorable because, you know, not only did I earn my first paycheck in an area that I'm really passionate about and love working in, I also made other professionals aware of me in the context of working with Midwest Radio. I got to work on some projects that I was really passionate about and learn a lot. Really, it was a learning curve the past few months, and that's what I treated the internship as, a learning curve, because that's the only way you can get better, you know. But as well as that, you know, personally, things are going great as well, which I'm really thankful for as well. And I got to do a few things that I was really looking forward to doing and checking off my to-do list. One of those was a big deal for me, which was going over to Manchester and seeing my first game at Old Trafford. I managed to get tickets off a friend of mine who was a season ticket holder, and oh my God, I don't know what I was expecting because I've never been to a Man United game before. I know of the atmosphere, you can see it. It seeps through the television when you're watching the game live on Sky Sports. But really, when you're in the stands and the chants start going and that first goal goes in, there's a euphoric energy. And really, that's the word I would use to describe my experience at Old Trafford. It was euphoric. For a Man United fan who's never been there before, to have that experience, to have a great game to go to where we played out of our skin. We played such attractive looking attacking football. We were courageous with our chances. We took them where we needed to. When we needed to kick up the ass, we got it, and we kept on track after that. The first 10 minutes of that Leicester game, I was very wary of them conceding early and Leicester scoring early. But, that first 10 minutes, Garnacho was being ripped apart down the wing, and I think, we compensated for that and really got our asses handed to us at halftime and made sure that we stayed on track after that. Rashford was a sight to behold. He is a sight to behold this season. As well as Rashford, Weghorst, I thought, played an excellent game against Leicester. Fred had some great passes. There was one pass in particular to Rashford, I think during the first half, that I was just blown away by. On top of that, Luke Shaw played out of his skin. Garnacho had a good bit of problems on the right wing, letting them rush behind him. And I think subbing him off at that stage was a good idea because it really wasn't working out. It wasn't his day. But overall, I was very lucky, and I felt very lucky to get my first game be a win like that over Leicester. We played phenomenal, out of our skin. And really, when you look at how we did against Liverpool, God, I would have hated to be at that game. That would have absolutely destroyed me. Now, when you look last season, I think we lost 6-0 to Liverpool last season. What's one more goal? I'm not excusing the 7-0. 7-0 is inexcusable in any regard. But when I saw that scoreline, I was disheartened. I was distraught. But, I wasn't holding my breath that Liverpool were going to go on this magnificent run after it. Look at the result they got this past weekend against Bournemouth. Yesterday, 1-0. And really, we didn't perform at all against Liverpool, and we should be ashamed of it. We need to treat it like what it was, which was an embarrassment, and we need to move on and learn from it, because that's all we can really do. And I think, to bounce back and to win 4-1 in the Europa League was a great response, because it shows that, yes, we had a humiliating defeat against bitter rivals, but this is not the end of Ten Hag's run with the club. He is not going to let them go downhill anytime soon. And really, if this was Man United a year ago, 2 years ago, I would be deathly afraid that this was the end of our season, that this was the end of our challenge for top four and gaining back Champions League football. But I'm not. I'm not afraid of that loss. I'm not worried about it. I am worried in the sense that that can't happen again. We can't allow that to happen because it's not acceptable. But really, when you look at our response to that loss and you look at Liverpool's response to that win, we came away from that loss to go straight into our first leg of the last 16 tie in the Europa League. A team like Real Betis that could in the past have bet us after a bad defeat like that. And I think, the Man United of old a couple of years ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago, I would bet on us losing that game because of the knock we had taken in the Liverpool game. But I think Ten Hag has us fundamentally and psychologically in such a good place, the whole squad, that we are able to bounce back from losses like that with impressive wins. To go from 7-0 to Liverpool and then a 4-1 dominating win in the Europa League, a league that we have every chance of winning if we stay on form. I think Ten Hag has done a great job of keeping us on track even after setbacks like that. Let's look at Liverpool's reaction to their win. Really, 7-0. You have to look at that and say, oh my God, Liverpool have had such a crap season so far. They've been massively inconsistent, really struggling to break the top four and guarantee themselves Champions League football for next season. All season, they've needed one result to kind of kickstart them back, to get them back on track. And I think a lot of people saw that 7-0 and thought, oh, Liverpool are back. They're back in contention. Look out, Man City. Look out, the big clubs. They're coming back into the top four with a vengeance. You know, maybe they might end up doing a miracle run and trying to get second place or something like that. You know, mount a challenge again. What do? Go out and lose 1-0 in their next game against Bournemouth. That is inconsistency personified. Liverpool are inconsistent to the highest degree this season. And really, I think, you know, when their fan base looked at that 7-0, like any fan base should, they probably thought, okay, we're back. We're back, baby. Look at that. Flawless performance. We dominated that derby. You know, Man United fans can't say anything to us now for the next while. Yes, humiliating for us. But how bad is it to go from 7-0 at Man United, beating us that way, and then losing 1-0 to Bournemouth? How can you justify that? How can you explain that? And Mo Salah, who became Anfield's top goal scorer in the Premiership, surpassing Robbie Fowler in that game against Man United, went from that to skying a penalty into the stands against Bournemouth. This season has been a whirlwind for many reasons. You know, you have teams, the big teams, massively underperforming, the likes of Chelsea. You have other teams coming to the forefront, like Newcastle. You know, Spurs are getting another go at top four. You know, they're currently in fourth place and 6 points ahead of Liverpool at the moment. I just think Liverpool's inconsistency has cost them this season and will continue to cost them. I can't see them breaking into the top four. They just look unreliable. And when you look at our position in the table, third place, we are currently we have 1 game in hand over Liverpool and 2 games in hand over Tottenham. I think Ten Hag has top four wrapped up for us. I'm confident in the way we're playing. That 7-0, it hurt like a dagger, don't get me wrong. But I think I'd rather have a humiliating defeat and secure top four than win that game and end up getting out of top four and having to play Europa League football for another season. We've had a massively successful season with Ten Hag. He's definitely seems to be the way forward. He's making shrewd decisions because he has to. And by the looks of it, hopefully the Glazers will be out soon, because they just have no idea how to run a football club, and the sooner they're out, the better. Let me know what your thoughts are on Liverpool's position in the league and Man United's position in the league. Do you agree with me that Ten Hag has us back on track and that we're fundamentally sound, or do you think there's definitely areas to plaster up and really focus in on? You know, we're nowhere near perfect just yet. I'm not claiming that we are, but I do feel a sense of confidence going forward, which I haven't felt for quite some time. I love to discuss football and all things Premier League, so hopefully down the line you'll see more guests on to discuss football clubs and the way their football clubs are going. I love to get some debates going between Liverpool and Man United fans on here as well, so hopefully they'll happen down the line. Until then, I'd love to know your thoughts up on Anchor FM, Spotify and Twitter. The Oscars are fast approaching and they're taking place this evening in Hollywood town. I don't know if actually it's Hollywood or not, but they're taking place this evening. And it's very exciting because the Irish have taken over and there's a great number of Irish talents on display across several different categories. The Banshees of Inisherin obviously leading the charge with 9 nominations across 7 different categories. And it's very exciting. You know, the great talent on display. You have the likes of Colin Farrell for Best Actor, along with some great talent there, like Brendan Fraser and Austin Butler. You have supporting actress Kerry Condon, who did excellent in that movie. You have Barry Keoghan and obviously Brendan Gleeson. As well as that, you know, After Sun, you have Paul Mescal for Best Actor. You also have movies like Colin Kuhn, who is breaking history records. You know, it's the first Irish-speaking movie to reach more than 1 million in the box office. and it's up for international film. I definitely think, that's one worth seeing. And it's great that an Irish speaking language, the Irish language itself, is getting this attention on a global scale. So hopefully that means only great things going forward for Irish speaking movies. In just a few moments, you'll hear a conversation between myself and Jack McDonald, who I had on the show, to discuss the upcoming Oscars and the great Irish talent on display. Before we get into that, I want to discuss a movie that I got to see recently and one or two TV shows that I've been watching recently as well. The movie is My Sailor, My Love. I got to go to the premiere this past week representing Midwest. That's one of the perks around that. I got to go see Banshees of Inisherin. Was for the premiere as well, which I discussed on the show before. Similar to the Banshees, My Sailor, My Love was shot primarily in Achill, but also in locations in Castlebar and Newport as well. The movie stars James Cosmo, Breed Brennan and Catherine Walker. It's directed by Finnish movie maker Klaus Harrow, and this was his first English-speaking movie, which was very impressive. Like I said, it's primarily shot in Achill, and similar to the Banshees, the island of Achill really is on display. The beauty here, it's almost a secondary character. Okay, let's get into some spoiler-free talking points here. Really, this story is about last loves. And a quick synopsis: when a widower begins a new romantic relationship, this puts strain on the relationship with his daughter, which quickly begins to deteriorate. Catherine Walker plays a daughter in this, and she does an excellent job as Grace. She really brings a lot of sorrow, a lot of trauma, a lot of sadness to her role. And this does a lot for the plot and a lot for the story, because you're almost questioning her and her actions at times, because she's fueled by her mixed emotions for her father. She wants to help him, but she's also angry at him, and there's a lot of resentment there that's kind of layered down and buried away, and she won't let herself see that or address it. And really, there is a lot of burst out scenes of tension and conflict in this movie that you don't see coming. It builds up over time and you don't know what to expect in certain scenes, and then an outburst of emotion happens. But for the most part, this movie has a calmness to it, and it's like the calming before the storm. And really, that is because of the way James Cosmo, his character Howard, interacts with the character of Annie, the love interest, played by Breed Brennan, who does an excellent job here. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the relationship with Grace and her father Howard, which is full of tension, which is full of anger and resentment. So really the mood of the movie switches on a dime. Whenever you have Grace and Howard in a room together, you feel that tension. But when Annie comes in, there's all love and it's all happy-go-lucky. So I thought that the director's choice to have one character represent one feeling for Howard and the other character represent something else was a very good way to go. I think this movie does a good job of building up the tension, keeping you in the dark and keeping you guessing in terms of wondering what actually went on between Grace and Howard, why she has this resentment and what's fueling that anger. But overall, the movie is a good watch. I didn't know what to expect going in, like I mentioned, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It probably won't measure up to Banshees. I don't see it being nominated for an Oscar anytime soon, but it is a solid movie. I'd recommend going to see it because the script writing is there, the plot is very interesting, and the acting on display is very good. You know, Catherine Walker carries the movie at times. James Cosmo, he's known for his acting roles in other movies as well as the Game of Thrones series. And Breed Brennan as Annie does a great job as well, because she's known for these small subtle roles in movies and TV shows, and she makes the most out of them, and she does it here again with My Sailor, My Love. So if you're looking for something unique to go and watch in the cinema, I would recommend giving it a look. Let me know if you've seen the movie already and what your thoughts are on it, up on Anchor FM, Spotify and Twitter. In terms of a rating, I give it 3 out of 5. It does have a solid script, but the ending, you don't get much closure from it. And I think a lot of people, a lot of audience members, they want closure, and really the ending is as important as the beginning. But in between, there's some great tension, some great monologues, and the acting on display is very good. So 3 out of 5 for me. In terms of other things I've been watching lately, I've been watching The Last of Us TV series. I have played the games, so it's there's not as much investment with me because I know what's going to happen and I don't want to go through the heartache. Anyone who's played The Last of Us will know what happens in the second game. So really, I've gone through 2 episodes. I do like Pedro Pascal as Joel. You know, there's a lot of controversy with Bella Ramsey playing Ellie, but I think she gets the mannerisms right and really she embodies the character very well. I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the series, but really, I think, you know, in terms of TV shows that were adapted from games, it seems to be doing a very honourable job. And there does seem to be a lot of the original people that worked on the game with Ubisoft. They are involved with the TV show, so that's good to see that the originals are being brought back in. Even Troy Baker, who played Joel in the game, has a casting role in the TV series, so that's great to see. I am looking forward to watching the rest of the season, even though I know what's going to happen, and I'm looking forward to seeing season 2 as well. Hopefully they get the casting right for Abby and for Dina as well, because we see a sneak peek of Dina in one of the episodes. I haven't watched it yet, but I saw it online, so I'm looking forward to finishing off that series. Let me know up online if you played The Last of Us, how you think the adaptation of the TV show is doing and honouring the game. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let me know up on Anchor FM, Spotify and Twitter. When I return, I'll be joined by Jack McDonald to discuss this year's Oscars and the overwhelming Irish presence at the ceremony. I'm joined now on the line by Jack McDonald. He's been on the show many times before to talk movies and TV. Jack, thanks for joining me.
Great to talk to you, Kyle.
We are going to be talking about this year's Oscars. In particular, we're going to be discussing 2 big movies, Banshees of Inisherin and Colin Kuhn, both up for nominations in their respective categories. Banshees of Inisherin obviously breaking the world record, or the record for most nominations for an Irish film in the Oscars this year, and as well as that, After Sun, starring Paul Mescal, which we talked about on your podcast just a few moments ago as well. To discuss the Banshees of Inisherin and Colin Kuhn, because those really are the big films coming out of Ireland for this year's Oscars. A lot of buzz around Banshees of Inisherin in particular. You know, it's done so much already for the island of Achill with tourism, as well as that Inishmore. People can't stop talking about this movie. What are your opinions on the movie? What did you make of it when you first saw it?
To be honest with you, Kyle, I think half the buzz surrounding it is you. You absolutely waxing lyrical about it, and rightfully so. It is a fantastic film. I first saw it on a Tuesday night in Santry, and to be honest with you, I was enamoured with it since. I didn't know what to expect. You know, you hear names like Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, but it can be very difficult to know what they're going to produce. And certainly what they produced was over 2 hours of absolute magic. As we spoke on my programme, Martin McDonagh is an absolute veteran in the film business, the film game, and he lived up to all of his previous titles. He has been involved in some really fantastic projects. We spoke about, how much he has managed to achieve in such a little period of time. Even thinking about In Bruges was only just 2008, so all the way up now, playing with this trio. And even when you look at the script itself, Martin McDonagh reportedly spent about the last 10 years refining it, because he was afraid that if he was to reunite this trio of himself, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, that he might wreck it. So he wanted to make sure that it was perfect, and in my opinion, what they produce is very much close to perfect. It's a small film, and I mean that in a very positive manner. It doesn't try to change the world, and its opinion of itself is fairly modest. And I think even its opinion of itself is kind of Irish in that sense. It doesn't think it's, the future of filmmaking or anything like that. But it has a story it wants to tell. And in my opinion, it tells it in a very respectful, emotive manner.
Well, one thing you did mention there was Martin McDonagh's directing ability and the fact that he did spend so many years trying to get the script right. And thank God he did, because what he has on screen with Banshees of Inisherin, like you said, it's a small film. It doesn't try to change the world. But in doing so, it is changing the world, because to have so many nominations, to be getting this buzz around your film, you must be doing something right. And this pairing of Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell, it worked in Bruges. It's working here again on screen as Porrick O'Sullivan and Colin, both respectively, Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell. They strike up a magic and a chemistry on screen whenever they're together. What did you make of the performances in this film? Because there are some great supporting roles as well.
There are some fantastic performances in this film, and to be honest with you, there was no performance that you could pick out of a lineup and say it was out of place. I think everybody really excelled in the roles that they were given. You know, some people needed to be the shining stars, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson, to a lesser extent Kerry Condon, and others were very much acutely aware of the roles they had to play, and they still lived up to the glory of it. I'm even thinking of, say, Pat Short, who's in the film for what must be, 10, 15 minutes, but he really absorbs the screen while he does it, while allowing Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson's arc to still continue to take a lot of the limelight. I think particularly you have to give a lot of credit to Brendan Gleeson, because what he portrays is such a strange set of emotions that on a lesser actor it would come across as kind of psychotic and just a mental breakdown, as opposed to being, in my opinion, a mental breakdown with a hell of a lot of truth behind it, which is essentially that Brendan Gleeson's character isn't happy with his place in life. He has this artistic aspiration, but he hasn't attained pretty much any of it. And so in that sense, I think Brendan Gleeson probably, maybe he was a little bit, stiffed to not be as respected or as acclaimed in this year's Oscars. Colin Farrell did a fantastic job, and the actor and the emotions he are portraying are different, but probably equally complex in their simplicity. It's a little bit ironic in that sense, because he's not trying to portray too many overly complicated emotions that we see in Brendan Gleeson's character. He's portraying niceness, which has to be one of the simplest emotions, but yet one of the most difficult to nail, to get right, and to portray over to an audience. So, to be honest with you, I think you would be hard-pressed to find anybody who didn't live up to their paycheck.
And just expanding on the other film, Colin Kuhn, which we talked about on your podcast not too long ago. Colin Kuhn breaking the record, I think, for making €1 million in the box office, the most any Irish-speaking movie has ever made, and nominated for Best International Film in this year's Oscars. The young starlet who performs in this movie, Catherine Clinch, only 12 years old and up for nominations for her performance in this movie as well. Great ensemble, great cast, and a great story behind it. Your thoughts on Colin Kuhn?
Colin Kuhn, again, was one that from the outset, it was very difficult to know where it was going to go. It had a huge amount of buzz coming into the film, which is what turned my head to it. But a lot of people I spoke to about it before going to see it were quite dismissive of the idea of an Irish language picture. They felt, I suppose, that it would be another in the template of Irish language pictures, which are generally a little bit tacit and a little bit maybe disconnected from where audiences are. Sometimes they go the overly religious kind of route, and they portray Ireland as this weird kind of southern state where we all pray to Jesus and there's no problems in our household. Or they do a bad Tarantino ripoff but they throw in the Irish language in there. And in both settings, there is just inauthentic storytelling laced throughout. Whereas with Colleen Kuhn, there is nothing but authenticity. I think, as we spoke about on my show, there perhaps is a stage of life element to Colleen Kuhn. There certainly is to Banshees of Inisherin, but I think if you were of a particular vintage, Colleen Kuhn, which essentially is the story of a neglected girl in a household that is too big for the foundations that it's built on. The father can't support his wife, let alone the kids they have together. It's fraught with tension. And I think for, unfortunately, maybe too many people out there above, say, 30 or 40, this story might resonate in quite a hard-hitting manner. Certainly for myself and yourself, I think we came to the consensus that, our childhood was nothing but rainbows and sunshines. But for people maybe who are of this vintage where Colleen Kuhn would be a little bit more striking on a personal note, I would imagine it would be an incredibly insightful film. As somebody who didn't live through any of those such tension and kind of, I suppose, quiet atrocities, I certainly still was able to resonate with a lot of the emotion we saw on screen. A lot of the Irish elements. I'm even thinking about just, some of the pillars, the cars, the settings and the locations really felt like a rural Ireland where you drive around, even if you kind of leave Castlebar, where we both are right now. If you were to go maybe 5-10 minutes down the road, you would see some of these settings which are so beautifully portrayed on screen.
I have to agree with you on that, because as we spoke about earlier on today, it seems that this movie really is made for the older generation, exploring what life is like in the 1980s for households growing up, where, like we mentioned before, the siblings there might be 6 to 12 children in a household, and the effect that has on the household involved. This year has been a great year for Irish movies. To have nominations at the Oscars, I think we're the smallest country with nominations at this year's Oscars, which is a feat in itself. But to be nominated for multiple categories, the Banshees of Inisherin obviously leading those numbers, just how important is the ceremony to the Irish film industry as a whole?
Well, the Irish film industry previously, I think, was a slight bit of a joke, such that very little was produced here. What was produced was generally quite good, but we just couldn't seem to take the next step to become an internationally recognized center of production. And kind of just before lockdown, you started to see more and more articles in local papers that big Hollywood productions were coming. It was almost kind of 1930s-esque. The Yanks are coming. And by God, they have. Even some massive stars and celebrities have gone through places like Westport over the summer. Such is the appetite and the attitude for Irish cinema. So I think nothing but good things can be happening out of this international recognition. But to be honest with you, I don't know if we even need it, because it seems that Hollywood came to us a year or two before we came to them, so this is our first big splash, I would argue, in a long time on the Hollywood stage. But Hollywood have been putting a lot more money and a lot more productions in Ireland for the past 2 or 3 years, COVID notwithstanding.
And just to focus around some of the performances in each of these movies, really we talk about this year being a year for Irish movies, but it's also a year for Irish actors, particularly young up-and-coming Irish actors. Not to mention Barry Keoghan, we have obviously Paul Mescal and Catherine Clinch in Colleen Kuhn. Just to focus around Barry Keoghan, who's been making a big name for himself this past year, obviously. His role in the new Batman movie, even though it was a smaller role and it was a post-credit scene setting him up for a possible role in the Batman series with new directors under the helm. His performance in Banshees of Inisherin was one of my favourite. Like I said before, it's a role that could have easily been thrown away or undermined, and it could have been an underdeveloped character as Dominic, but he steals scenes and is the source of some great laughter in the movie with some great jokes alongside Porrick, played by Colin Farrell. Do you think this year, this past year and this upcoming year will give us some great Irish actors who can fill the shoes of actors like Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson?
Well, certainly Barry has a huge potential there. I think he has, I don't know, is it too much to say, but he certainly has a Brando or a De Niro. There is something bigger than a lot of the productions he has been a part of. I think he is more than the sum of his parts. He has a real emotional story behind it all, which, at least for an artist, generally helps their art. It kind of connects them to something a little bit more real and raw. And his role in Banshees of Inisherin can only do good things because he is now an internationally certified, credited actor in every sense of the word. Obviously, you mentioned his work in Batman, and he has been in a lot of other really big productions, but I think his role in Banshees of Inisherin allows him to blow off the cobwebs, so to speak. It can be hard to be yourself, whatever that means for an artist, but it can be hard to be yourself in a costume picture, in a Batman or any of those things. There has been some phenomenal performances in Batman and all of those things, but I think Banshees of Inisherin, by the very nature of its narrative structure, gives Barry Keoghan such an incredible scope to play with. And at least for himself, I think there's only good things. If he was on the stock market, you would invest heavily in Barry Keoghan stock.
Yes, he's been in great movies the past couple of years, including a great movie with Colin Farrell, I think it was in 2017, The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which was disturbing on one level, but his acting, like you said, he has almost a Marlon Brando presence about him most times he's on screen. And I think Banshees of Inisherin, for myself anyway, it seemed to be a home run for him right away. He seemed very at ease in his character, very comfortable in the role, and had a lot of quality time with Colin Farrell on and off set. They actually lived together during the filming of the movie, which made for an easier transition into playing these roles in the movie together. Just to focus on the nominations and the Oscars in general, it's a bit too early to be making predictions, but would you agree that we are likely to see an Irish Oscars and see Irish movies take over the Oscars this year?
I think we already have, to be honest with you, with 14 nominations, and we were speaking about it earlier, but what's so striking is that it's such a unilateral success. Best actor, best director, best film editing, best international feature, original score, screenplay, picture, supporting actor, visual effects. There are so many nominations there that it would be hard not to see this as an absolute unilateral success. You know, some people are joking that it should be held in the RDS in Dublin, such as our success right now. And to be honest with you, it's kind of hard to argue with it. Like even, you know, for example, Paul Mescal in After Sun. There is nothing particularly Irish about that picture, only Paul Mescal. But Paul's performance in that does the whole country proud. Again, such is his kind of range and his depth. It's very similar to Barry Keoghan in a sense that he is able to kind of paint on a wide canvas there. And I think After Sun, The Banshees of Inisherin and Colleen Kuhn are all three films that are so narratively focused and their directors are such auteurs that really the Irish talent was allowed to breathe, and and when it breathes, it seems to flourish. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing but good things to be said, and I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years it's the RDS or the Aviva or maybe even Croke Park, if they could get permission, that are hosting the Oscars.
Well, there's no doubt that it is a great year for Irish film. The Oscars, like you said, unilaterally, it's a win for us either way to be nominated in so many categories, to be taking over this ceremony, which is such a prestigious ceremony, and to have films like these on display, especially Colleen Kuhn, which we spoke about on your podcast, and talking about the significance of an Irish-speaking movie having this much of an influence and to be witnessed and appreciated on such a global scale, it really is maybe acting as a revitalization for the Irish language on a global scale. Your thoughts on that?
Well, the Irish language finally has a bit of balls. That's what we have been saying for the past while as we've been speaking about this film. And the more I think about it, I think the more it is true. The Irish language needed something a little bit authentic, and Colleen Kuhn certainly is that. There have been other Irish pictures and other people who have tried to bring the Irish language to a wider audience, but it is such a rich tapestry that you really need a bit of desire, something really captivating to make you interested in the language and to give you that, I suppose, kick up behind to actually care about the language, which is supposed to be our native tongue. There's a lot of really interesting stuff about how we made the English language Irish, but now it's time to make the Irish language Irish. For too long, it has been kind of held captive by a couple of long-haired hippies in Galway, and people who have made the Irish language something to kind of aspire to, and that was out of most people's reach, which is just a ridiculous thought because we're all Irish and our native language should be one that we're all at least familiar with. I'm not saying, Kyle, that you have to start texting me in Irish, because certainly I don't think I'd understand half of it, but it is lovely to see that the language, which has been passed on from generation to generation, suddenly has a fighting chance at not only surviving, but at thriving.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it's an excellent achievement. And like you mentioned, hopefully it goes on to have a revitalization and a deeper appreciation globally and more at home of how beautiful our Irish language is, and having that appreciated in Ireland. Just to finish up, I know it's a long way away, but not too long anyway. Several films are up for on nominations in each category. Which Irish film do you believe might dominate this ceremony?
I think it has to be Banshees of Inisherin. I think there's, like, when you look at the amount of nominations, the odds, at least from a stats perspective, would probably lead you to believe that the Banshees of Inisherin has to win something. And then also when you consider the press tour that has been going on, because of course we know with the Oscars and with kind of all awards ceremonies, there is a whole courting process that must be done. You have to turn up to functions in LA and all of these various kind of well-to-do places at the Wilburn and all of these famous theatres and hotels, and you have to kind of smooth with all of these kind of tastemakers who are on the board and who ultimately decide who wins and who loses. And I think that the sheer number of nominations for Banshees of Inisherin makes it such that obviously there's a real energy around that picture. We see, for example, Colin Farrell in a lot of stuff with, say, Variety, The Hollywood Reporter. He's doing sit-downs with other big actors. And in those sit-downs, he's really marshalling the other big stars as well. He's taking a real centre focus. So, I don't know, if I was to read the tea leaves, I would certainly think that Banshees of Inisherin has a real fighting chance. Colleen Kuhn can go a long way, but it is worth noting that it's only one category that it is nominated in, Best International Feature. It's a hell of a category to be nominated in, but it's also a very, very competitive category.
Yes, there's a lot of great movies up for nomination in that category, but hopefully, like you mentioned, it is winning a shout, and hopefully it does get recognised on that platform. I know I will certainly have my ear to the ground and will be sitting down and watching the Oscars this year with all the buzz around these Irish movies. Hopefully you do too. Jack, thanks for joining me on the segment. It's a pleasure as always, and hopefully we get you on again soon. If you all want to listen to myself and Jack talk more about the Banshees of Inisherin, Colleen Kuhn and the Oscars, we're just after doing a segment on his podcast, The Jack McDonald Show. So make sure to check out his podcast up on Spotify and check out his latest episode where we talk about that.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks. Cheers. It's always great to have Jack on the podcast to talk movies, and I often return the favour. I often appear on the Jack McDonald show to film a segment with him called Film Torture. So if ever you want to listen to both of us discuss movies, you can always go up on Spotify and check out the Jack McDonald show up there as well. Well, this brings the episode to a close. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to follow along up on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor FM for notifications of new episodes every week. I have big plans for 2023, and I can't wait for you to see what I have in store. This has been Is a Recording with Kyle Duffy. Thanks for listening.